Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd. Ahbati fillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hayyakum Allah. أسأل الله كريم رب العرش العظيم أن يتولنا في الدنيا والآخرة. Ahbati fillah. A question was asked. I really wanted to ask for advice on how to become a scholar and with regards to money and family. My older brother says that he will provide for me and he wants me to focus on studying Islam to be a scholar. But also, he does have a certain limit on how much he can provide. I hope you don't mind, but I know you answered this before about how to make money and how to be a scholar, etc. But I wanted to follow up and ask that. My brother told me that I can't work and leave to study, then come back, because then people will not give me a job or something like this. So I wanted to ask Ustad, I hope you don't mind, what job do you do or know that this can work? I work, leave to study, and repeat this process. Because I know you mentioned that you worked, then left to study. So how did you do it? What specific jobs can that work with? This is generally my question. I love you for the sake of Allah, and I ask Allah to unite us in Jannatul Firdaus. Ameen. Ahabatu fillah. So when we, as the questioner mentioned, I have dealt with this question on numerous occasions from various angles from many people. But what I will say in general, that everyone's situation is different. Secondly, that the reality now is not like the reality when I left, employment-wise and otherwise. So those jobs that we considered somewhat, they were a great ni'mah for many of us who especially worked in universities and colleges in Saudi Arabia and so forth, teaching English. If you know Sheikh Muhammad Jabali, we worked at the same university. He worked in, I think his background is like chemistry or something like this. So he was like a professor in chemistry or something similar to this. And so those opportunities are much, much less. They're dwindling rapidly because of Saudiization, meaning Saudis get employed in many of those jobs because they need to employ their people. So they've had a program of rapid Saudiization, but that's somewhat besides the point. So for many of us who were not students in the Islamic University in Medina or other universities there, that our opportunities to study came through us working, and then outside of work we did talab al-ilm. Now the reality is, and I can only talk about Saudi Arabia, but I think this is a pretty similar issue throughout the Gulf, is mostly you don't have the luxury of time anymore. And this is aside from the pandemic. This was pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, I'm sure, that you will not have those kind of luxury jobs. There are jobs that pay a lot of money. Maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you are a banker, maybe you are something like this, but you will not more than likely have any time to do talab al-ilm, or you will have to squeeze and fight, and it will be very difficult to really do much talab al-ilm. The scholars mention, and even from the bab of common sense, that tafarrug is obviously the best thing, which means where you can devote your time and just study. And that is the ni'mah of the Islamic universities, because they offer scholarships. For example, in Saudi Arabia, and even Azhar and other places like this, they offer scholarships to their students because they know in order to produce the kind of scholarship that they want to produce, that it requires the person to be able to study, to make tafarrug. So unless you have wealth, and as you mentioned, your brother will finance you to a certain extent, but you have to look at to what extent that is and where you can go to seek knowledge, because the doors are not open just to just waltz into Saudi Arabia, unlike other countries which are easier to get into. However, Saudi is relaxing some things. Again, this will be after the pandemic. So, because of your age, that you are very young, I'm assuming that you are maybe finished high school or something like this, or right at that age, then I would say for you, the best way is to apply to all the universities in Saudi Arabia that teach Islam, such as the Islamic University in Medina, Jamia, uh, Imam Saud in um, uh, in Riyadh, also King Abdulaziz in Jeddah, I think has a program now. Uh, I don't think will be on the level of those other two in Al Qura, but it, alhamdulillah, that would be a great opportunity if you get accepted in one of those universities. I think even Jamiat al-Tayyiba, which is in Medina as well, might have some, I think, Arabic language and some other things, perhaps. So if you can get into one of those universities and you get a scholarship, then you can focus your energy plus the money that your brother hopefully can provide for you. And then that will allow you to live sufficiently and probably comfortably, because you'll have the little money they give you from the university plus uh, the additional money, and you'll be able to, maybe you'll get married in your early years, or whenever you decide to get married, that can help you. The third point is also being concerned. I think what your brother is talking about is having maybe the difficulty for students of knowledge when they come back to the West, in that it can be very difficult. A lot of them are not supported. There are some that have big communities and so forth, and have networks, but there are also others who don't have that. And so, if you don't have a position as an imam, which generally are not very, unfortunately, very highly regarded positions for many reasons, and if you want details, go to Brother Sajid Lipham's channel. He has interviewed uh, Joe Bradford and others in this regard. And so uh, um, it's very important to have, because you are at a young age, to tie your camel. To tie your camel. This is what I advise, that if you don't, either you try to get into an Islamic university and get the scholarship, or if you have some other route, that whichever path is going to allow you to do both, then there's no harm. Meaning that you can study in an Islamic university and so forth, and do Sharia or whatever you're going to study, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, and likewise tying your camel in that you make provisions. You get provisions, and maybe you have a secular degree because you are young. Whereas you find that with many or some of the students of knowledge that had the best of both worlds. They were well educated in the secular universities, and they finished their Islamic studies. So those people have a greater demand when they come back to the West. I know many, or at least several, back in the US, and then also in Saudi Arabia and Canada. And some of them, they um, did have both degrees. So that way they could come back and have something else to fall back onto, because it's unfortunate, because in the West we don't realize the importance of scholarship. We like to ask questions sometimes after we make problems, after we do sins, then we like to find out if it's halal or haram. And we also like to, we take for granted the students of knowledge and mashayikh that come back, and others, and we don't really value them. And with that being the case, I think our community will really remain. And I'm not talking about Salafis, I'm talking about all the Muslim communities. The Deobandis are pretty good about their networks. I've seen that, at least here and in other places in Western Canada as well, that they have a strong system in place as far as their places, their studies in Dar al-Ulum. Then they come out and they have imams, they are muftis, and so forth. So the shahid being that they take care of their scholars or their whatever you call them, tulab al-ilm. And we don't, unfortunately, many of the Sunni communities, as far as Sunni adhering to the book and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially with regards to the al-asma'i wa sifat and the other i'tiqad of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'at wa manahij or minhaj of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'at, you find that the people are not really that serious about taking care of the students. And especially, I would say, I don't know your situation, you don't sound like you're probably a revert. Sounds like you have a Muslim family. But as reverts especially, you really have very little support unless you have a community that's already established. You come from a big revert area where there's a high population of indigenous Muslims, if you will. And so there are a lot of complications and complexities to this issue, unfortunately. And it is very difficult to really expect what the people expect of the students and the du'at when there is no support for them. So, for example, I know imams, I know sheikhs here that are local, the ones that aren't the big name ones that have the community as well as international presence, that they are Uber drivers and so forth. Well, if you're an Uber driver as a sheikh and other things, I'm not saying that you're above those things or you're above working, but you have to be realistic as far as what you demand from them. They have to survive. They cannot do all those services you want them to do backflips for free. So this is just not the reality. And it's a travesty, really, when you really look at the situation. And that's why I know a lot of students of knowledge, they don't even want to be imams. So then who are going to be your imams? And they come back, they graduate from many of the Islamic universities. So if you don't have a niche, some way to fit in, or some backing or something, you can be very well educated and have no place. So this is why I advise that when people are going overseas or what have you to study, is that they tie their camel, because the reality is not like it was perhaps in the past. And even in the past, it never has really been a large amount of support. People want everything for nothing. And that makes it very difficult to do da'wah ila Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for those who are naysayers, sorry to go on this rant, but when you look at a lot of the scenarios, for example, Saudi Arabia, the scholars are provided for by the society. They're provided for by the government. The government, many of the scholars, a lot of our scholars that are well known, that we love, and walillah alhamd, have had the chance to sit with many of them. Hey, you can't hardly name a name of one of them that wasn't a university professor in the past or now. Sheikh Abdul Muhsin, let's just talk about Medina. Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Ambad, Sheikh Abdul Razak, his son, Sheikh Ubaid al-Jabri was, Sheikh Rabi' was a professor, Sheikh Suleiman al-Rahili, Sheikh Ibrahim al-Rahili, both professors, Sheikh Muhammad bin Hadi, professor, Sheikh Abdullah Bukhari, professor, Sheikh Ali Tuwaidri, professor, Sheikh, so they are taken care of very well by the society, meaning they have a very excellent income and prestige and honor where they can, that's their job, is to teach and call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's very important. If you want to look at Yemen, which is a poor society, which doesn't have that same kind of support, and I can only talk about mainly the Salafi communities, but I do know a lot of the Ikhwan Muslimin communities there too, that they are supported by probably charities and also big wealthy people in the Gulf and otherwise. For example, the leader of Ikhwan Muslimin there, Sheikh Zindani, Abdul Majid Zindani, that and his university is well funded. He's well funded by huge entities around the world. He's recognized around the world. So that's not an issue for him. Funds suitcases of money. That's not an issue to do whatever they want. If they want to open something up in some place, if they want to fight the Shia Rafida, they have money. They get money from the Gulf and other places to fund it. So my point is funding. And when it comes to the Salafi communities, likewise, they have rich business people who will fund the dawah. They have international sponsors who fund the dawah because it has to be funded. Is the bottom line is you're not it takes money to live and to have that kind of activity. If you want to travel to give dawah, you have to have a plane ticket. You have to have a place to stay. You're going to be gone for 2 weeks. You're going to be gone for a week. You're going to be gone for a couple of days. It costs money. So it is generally, there are some, there are various sources of income. But like I said, if you are a McDonald's worker and you are a student of knowledge, this is not good for the long-term giving dawah for many, many reasons. And you'll be taken away from your field. So it's very important, I would say, although I've gotten on and off topic, that I say to you, tie your camel and try to get into an Islamic university. That will be the best way to kind of sustain yourself, because you do have to think about your future when you come back to the States. If you have an IT background, that's fantastic. You're an IT worker and you're a da'i. You do dawah when you can. The reality is, it is very difficult to be full-time doing dawah and answering questions and doing research and doing all the things that some people expect from you, and things even that you want to do. That's very, very difficult. So you have to put that in perspective. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to accept our good and forgive our evil. I hope that answered your question. Anything I said that was correct is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything I said that was incorrect from myself and the shaitan. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.